Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Glendale Transportation and Parking Commission meeting of Monday, October 24th, 2022. My name is Yazdan Amrani, the Director of Public Works for the City of Glendale. In a minute, we'll take a motion to elect a chairperson for the commission. However, before we do that, I'd like to read the following statement. For public comments and questions during the meeting, please call 818-937-8100. City staff will be submitting these questions and comments in real time to the appropriate person during this meeting. And with that, I'm calling this meeting to order at 6:02 p.m. May we have a roll call, please?
I'll take roll call. Commissioner Avagian,
Yes.
Commissioner Bonstein,
Present.
Commissioner Lester,
Here.
Commissioner Ordu-Begin,
Here.
the floor is open for discussion.
And Commissioner Yakubian is not here today. She's out sick. So with that, we will start the conversation or discussion for appointment of chairperson.
Okay, thank you. All right, I would like to present a motion to elect Commissioner Bonston to be chair.
I seconded.
Okay, we have roll call, please.
Commissioner Bonstein,
Yes, thank you.
Commissioner Avagian,
Yes.
Commissioner Lester,
Yes.
Commissioner Ordu-Begin.
Yes.
Congratulations.
It would be your job now, Chairperson Bonstein, to ask for the next item on the agenda and continue to do so step by step as we go.
The next item on the agenda is the flag salute.
For which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
A point of order, do I read the posting of the agenda? Next item, please.
Posting of the agenda. The agenda for Monday, October 24th, 2022 meeting of the Glendale Transportation and Parking Commission was posted by October 19, 2022 before 5 p.m. on the bulletin board outside of City Hall.
Thank you. Next item, please.
Approval of minutes. August 22, 2022, regular meeting.
I have reviewed and I motion an approval.
I seconded.
I'll take roll call. Chairperson Bonstein,
Yes.
Commissioner Avagian,
Abstention.
Commissioner Lester,
Yes.
Commissioner Ordu-Begin.
Yes.
Next item, please.
Presentations.
Madam Chair, if I may, our first presentation is an update on the Verdugo Wash project update. It's going to be presented by Bradley Calvert, Director of Community Development Department.
Thank you. Good evening, Commission members. Tonight, we're here to provide an update on the Verdugo Wash Visioning Project. I'll provide an overview of what the project is, kind of the goals and objectives of it. But first, what I would consider a few disclaimer points as we go into this. This is a visioning exercise. It really is intended for us to understand what is possible within the Verdugo Wash. It is by no means a final design. There's still a lot of work that needs to go into this. There's a lot of detail, everything from operations and maintenance plans to how we would get underneath some of these facilities and work on repairs. So what I like to say is that if this project was operating on a kind of a hypothetical one-year timeline from the day we started design to the day it would be open and completed, we're on January 1st at about 12:01 in the morning. We still have a really long way to go here. So everything that you see here is not intended to be at a specific location with the exception of maybe one concept that we have here. They're really supposed to be kind of a kit of parts, some typologies, and overall as we move through the design, those will be refined into the next kind of phases of how we kind of approach the unique context of the 15 different neighborhoods that do align the wash. So just an overview of what we'll discuss today, project goals and description, what we're trying to do with this project. We're going to go through a handful of precedents of where we pulled some inspiration from in terms of what the potential for the Verdugo Wash could be based on what we've seen from other projects. We're going to go through some of the design concepts that have been developed thus far to date, talk about some of the public input, and then we're going to discuss some of the next steps that come along with this project. We are in the, essentially where we are right now is we're in a position where we're about to close out this Verdugo Wash visioning phase and be able to move on to the next one. So we've been going to the boards and commissions, obtaining some of your feedback so that we can incorporate that into the final document that we will present to council in mid-November of this year before we go into any subsequent phases based on council direction. So the Verdugo Wash, a 9.5-mile flood control channel. It is part of the Los Angeles River tributary system. This connects 15 distinct neighborhoods, starting all the way in the very far northern ends of the city and going all the way down to Confluence Park at the Los Angeles River. This runs through single-family neighborhoods, a debris basin, a golf course, multi-family neighborhoods, commercial centers, urban centers, civic centers. It runs through a number of kind of unique assets that do present a pretty unique opportunity for us to be able to connect these different areas through a dedicated and safe pathway for active transportation. This is seen to be for cyclists and pedestrians. That is the main objective from a transportation perspective. These are just some of the images from some of the existing conditions. About a year and a half or so ago, some of the design team members and some of the city staff members went into the wash to do a tour, kind of assess the existing conditions, riding the full length of the route, understanding that there are some very unique moments along this wash. We have historic bridges that cross it. Sometimes we have a box channel, other times it's chamfered. The widths vary, the heights vary. So again, that's why I kind of issue that a little bit of a disclaimer when we go through the designs is that they could change in a lot of different ways depending on the kind of context that they're in and the kind of existing physical conditions. This project really is about access and opportunity at the end of the day. This map kind of highlights just some of the unique areas and kind of unique opportunities for us to enhance some of the uses around the Verdugo Wash and within the Verdugo Wash, some of the kind of key areas that are nearby, but also the opportunities for access points. Again, I'll probably keep issuing a number of these disclaimers as we go through and we look at the graphics. This is not indicative of any precise locations for access points. We're not looking at specific properties at this point. There are some existing ones that are already there. We would need to kind of further assess and refine as we were to kind of choose where access points would be. But we would not be using private property for that. We wouldn't be going through anyone's private property to provide that access. So really this is kind of a diagrammatic example of how many kind of different locations we could create opportunities for someone to get into the wash and on that route. Now, as part of this project, we looked at a number of different precedents, and this project is looking at enhancing active transportation. It's trying to create new open space for the city, enhance sustainability strategies, looking at this kind of concrete channel and how can we be greener about it, how can we retain water, how can we add vegetation, but also from kind of a social perspective, how can we create places, especially in these kind of more urban nodes, where people want to gather. So one of the examples that we looked at, and this is actually from the design team that was contracted to do this work, Melk, their design for the barn in West Sacramento. This opportunity of creating these kind of iconic and unique landmarks, if you will, where people can gather. Maybe there's commercial activity there, maybe it's a performance venue, maybe it's just a gathering space. But looking at just some sort of kind of iconic and unique structures that could align the wash, really trying to create kind of a unifying feature. While we are trying to design and respond to the unique context of all 15 different neighborhoods, we also want to make sure that there are kind of certain threads that as you move through the wash, you know that you're on the wash. It's been kind of branded in a way, whether that's through signage, whether that's through a certain design feature that's incorporated, maybe it's through public art. We're not quite at that point yet, but those are all kind of ideas that have been considered. Another project that we looked at, the Atlanta Beltline in Atlanta, Georgia. This was a conversion of existing rail line about 22 miles around the city. They've successfully converted about 4 to 6 miles, if I'm not mistaken, into a pedestrian and cyclist path. It connects the urban centers of the city as well as some of the major parks in the area. The image that you're looking at here, this is one that we really kind of took to heart as we were moving through this design process. What you're looking at is a former parking lot for a Sears warehouse distribution center. If you're familiar with the Southeast at all, they get torrential downpours in the summer and they have to be able to manage that water. It was about a $48 million job to be able to pipe that water out and filter it and clean it. Someone came up with a concept for this park instead, which actually cost them about $19 million. What's happened from this park since it's been in place is wildlife has returned that hasn't been in the region for about 50 years, or at least in this immediate area. They are able to treat stormwater before it enters into the stormwater system, and everything that you see here is actually designed to be flooded. If you look towards the kind of the back right side where the wall is, you kind of see two narrow bands that run along that. The first is the 100-year flood event. The second is the 500. And this has flooded several times. The boardwalk that you see there, the infrastructure that's been put in place, is designed to be flooded. And that's a similar approach that has been taken as part of the exercise for this Verdugo Wash visioning. And then obviously an active transportation perspective. We looked at the 606 in Chicago, and by no means were these the only 3 projects we looked at. I think we had a good 25 or so that we were pulling inspiration from, everything from Seattle to Houston to Atlanta. A couple projects here in California as well, some kind of lessons learned. Obviously the Los Angeles River is an example for us for lessons learned, as they've already begun some implementation. We have the Escondido Creek Trail as well for some lessons learned. On a more kind of local perspective. But we did look kind of far and wide to be able to get some design inspiration, kind of get best practices, understand what they did that was successful. So in the case of the 606, highly used pedestrian and cyclist pathway, conversion of a former rail line as well, similar to the Atlanta Beltline, and really just kind of become this this thread through Chicago's neighborhoods, and those neighborhoods really kind of being pearls on the strings to enhance connectivity. So this is an example of a typical section we would find in terms of the box channel for the Verdugo Wash. The lines that you see there represent the different flooding events that could occur. The design team also has an engineering team and a hydrology team that's part of this that has helped kind of analyze what we think could go inside the wash. A good analogy to this is essentially we have a cup of water. We're trying to figure out how much ice we can put in there before that water would kind of overflow. And that's what some of these lines represent. And then some of the design responses are to ensure that it would be able to withstand some of the more extreme events that we may see within the wash. This is one of the concepts in terms of how the wash could be articulated for any kind of future vision. When we set out on this project, one of the early goals was, is there a way for us to kind of soften the bottom of the Verdugo Wash, not have that concrete channel? As we dug into the history and as we looked at the flows and the rain amounts that do come, it was determined that that was something that was not feasible. Essentially, if we soften the bottom of this, it would slow down the flow of the water so much that it could create significant flooding risks. Secondly, this is not a true river. There is not a consistent flow of water that moves through this wash at all times. So if we soften the bottom, we would not be able to rely on habitat surviving on the floor of the wash. There are moments where we have identified there are opportunities for us to be able to soften part of the bottom, but in order to be able to do that, we would have to dig this Verdugo Wash significantly deeper to be able to handle the flows of water. Essentially, the flow of water has to move very, very quickly through this space so that it doesn't start to fill up and then empty itself into the LA River. So the concept that is being considered at this point would be to create this kind of raised platform. Again, this is just one kind of typology. This could be done in several different ways, depending on the neighborhood and the context that we're in. But you can see that there are 3 different pathways in this case. We have a much wider portion of the wash to work with. We're able to separate bicyclists, pedestrians, particularly from the perspective of safety. If you are coming southbound on this, it is downhill and you do move quite quickly. We actually had some apps on us when we were doing the tour, and we were approaching 30 miles an hour at some points on our bicycles. So ensuring that we can separate those modes is very important. So that's what you kind of see here. Now, you can see that there's a number of lines that do intersect with the actual pathways in terms of those kind of flood events. Again, this is designed to be able to kind of withstand that flood, similar to what we looked at in terms of that old Fourth Ward Park, using materials, using design strategies that would be able to withstand water kind of rushing through this space. But the intent is that most of this would pass underneath the structure. We would be able to create very, very deep planting wells, depending on the location, depending on the height. Again, this is just a kind of a diagram. The height of everything could be calibrated and changed based on context. We could have planting wells that are anywhere from 5 to 8 feet deep. So we would be able to get substantial vegetation within this space. The idea behind this really is kind of mitigating the urban heat island effect, creating more green space. There will be opportunities here for maybe to be able to capture some water, treat that water, discharge it into the water table, depending on some of the locations that we'll be in. Those are all things that we want to keep as strategies and ideas early on that need to be kind of vetted as we go further along. Just another example, in this case, this was one of the areas where it was identified that there could be some portions of the bottom that could be softened. You kind of see that in the center. You can see here different heights for the pathways. This is really in response to, depending on the context that they're in. Are we trying to kind of protect privacy of single-family neighborhoods that are nearby? We may not see this platform go edge to edge. From a security and safety perspective, we wouldn't want people to be able to climb out, but we can also prevent that through the planting wells in some cases. But there may be points where we don't go all the way to the edge just so that we can preserve that distance in that space. But between the vegetation, between enhancing some of the existing walls there, likely through public art, we'd be able to mitigate some of the sound that's in there. In fact, one of the frequent public comments that we've heard is that even today, right now, it really serves as kind of an echo chamber. You can hear sound moving up and down the wash. We would hope that many of these strategies are really done with the intent to help mitigate that as well, and really kind of mute some of that noise pollution, if you will, that does occur. Even some of the sounds from the 134 can travel up and down the wash from the passing cars. But you see that there's kind of different heights, different levels. These are all interchangeable. This is not intended to be kind of set in stone for a very specific location, but just to illustrate that we can be very flexible in where the locations of things may be, depending on where we are along the wash. So kind of visualizing that in 3D perspective, this is what we would consider to be one of the more narrow segments of the wash. As you get north of the debris basin, it's relatively narrow, especially when you get to the very far northern parts, to the point where you couldn't even fit a car in there. So it would be very hard for us to be able to separate bicycles and pedestrians in this area. What I'll also add is that we have a number of other challenges from a hydrology perspective that is, per our recommendation to City Council coming in November, is that we right now kind of shelve all the concepts above the debris basin, north of the debris basin. In order to make that work, it would take significant engineering, a significant amount of work. The wash would need to be much, much deeper or much, much wider. Wider is not an option. Deeper is very expensive. And also through our public engagement, we have learned from many of the neighborhoods that they are simply just not interested in the project. It is not a very dense environment. It's not a very urban environment. It wouldn't serve as many people. So really kind of the ROI in terms of spending that time, that effort, that money on this project is better utilized probably in more urban areas that can impact and help more people. In fact, we'll show a diagram here a little later on that shows the range that people will be able to move via bicycle that is greatly enhanced, especially in the southern parts of the city. So this is an early concept that was produced, but right now the recommendation will be to not move forward at this time with any further design work north of the debris basin. As we move further down the wash, we start to see other kind of configurations of the channel. In this case, we have kind of a chamfered channel. You can see things are starting to widen up a little bit more. We have an opportunity for pedestrian pathways and then separating cyclists. We now have more opportunities to be able to incorporate kind of moments of respite, if you will. In this case, we have benches. We have enhanced vegetation. This location is in, near, and around the Oakmont Country Club. Again, that would probably take a lot of work for us that we need to still continue to work out in terms of safety. For users of this pathway, especially with golf balls flying over them. We have a number of kind of ideas and kit of parts to go along with that that we'll slowly kind of put out as we advance those. But here's one of the, just kind of one of the early concepts that could be implemented. And then as we get wider, we start to get more and more opportunity. In this case, we're still not in a very urban area, so there's not a lot of activity. You don't see plazas, you don't see kind of play structures or anything, but there are these moments where we can create kind of terrace seating, amphitheater-style spaces, if you will, that could be used for various activities. We still kind of expect this area to be relatively calmer than you would in more urban areas, but still having the opportunity to separate pedestrians and separate cyclists. Again, you start to see the vegetation really start to enhance and start to beef up as we move further down, and we have more room to play with when we go kind of wall to wall. And then as we start to enter more urban areas, the ability to start incorporating in play structures. You can kind of see in the distance on the far right side, there's a little plaza and a shade structure back there. Opportunities for us to incorporate public art, performance spaces, potentially some limited kind of commercial cafe or kiosk uses, but really starting to be able to amp up the amount of activity that can occur, the amenities for people, because one, the wash is wider here, two, we are in an area that we believe can sustain that increased activity better than some of the more residential and single family areas. Just another example from some of the wider areas, you can see that in this case, the pedestrian and the cyclist pathway are delineated by different materials. Again, these are very early concepts, so we could see this evolve in many different ways. What you may have noticed in each of these images, we tried to incorporate this kind of element of wood. One, from kind of a softening perspective, so everything is not concrete, but also so that we have sort of a design element, design feature that carries throughout the entire wash. If I go back to one of those narrower segments, you can see the get down point was created with a series of stairs that was, made of some sort of wood-like material, but having some sort of aesthetic that would move all the way through the wash, so it's kind of a consistent thread and idea. And then there's the debris basin, and we really see this as kind of the northern terminus at this point for kind of the next phase of work. Right now, this is a really unique and great opportunity. It's a very large area that's relatively inaccessible, basically just fills up with water in the rainy months and slowly moves that down the wash. But really kind of a great opportunity for us to create some space where people could at least use it, move through it, or even more importantly, for us to enhance it from a kind of natural environment perspective. So one of the early concepts, this just shows kind of a narrow boardwalk that will weave through this, eventually connecting to either adjacent streets or other parts of the wash as you move down it. You can see in this case, there's kind of this pavilion structure that's incorporated. One of the goals here, as you can see, this is all elevated, is to have a very, very light touch in this area. We don't want to create a significant piece of infrastructure. The goal here would be really to enhance the vegetation, enhance the fact that it is a natural environment and could be improved from that perspective. There are deer, there are other animals that are here. There's a great opportunity for us to really kind of enhance that element. In much like that old Fourth Ward Park that we use as an example in Atlanta, those opportunities to have that water below it, this would all be designed in that kind of same spirit where it would be designed to flood. But really kind of having that light touch in terms of how people can use, move through, and pass through the space. It's not something we want to just disrupt a lot, but it is a great opportunity to provide access and maybe some moments of respite. What was that? Okay, mobility. So the diagram that you see on the left side, this is how far that someone can get between 5 and 30 minutes on a bicycle. Right now with the existing plan, so really you're kind of starting right in downtown, so the darker the color, the shorter the distance. You can see that heat map does not go out all that far. If we were to use just the existing access points that are along the Verdugo Wash right now, that's the second graphic, that is how far you can get between 5 and 30 minutes on a bicycle. Again, this is in a protected environment. It's off surface streets. It's not shared with any surrounding cars or any traffic. The third graphic on the far right represents if we were to add additional access points along that route. And you can see that heat map is really concentrated from the debris basin south. Again, really kind of proving the point that we heard from the community that in the parts further north, there's not as much to access. There's not a lot of commercial places. There are not a lot of commercial places up there. The population density isn't as great. And we're really best served by trying to focus on how we improve access, especially for South Glendale. We'll have another map that will be released in the report that actually shows further south in Glendale and the ability to be able to get to right at the heart of that wash in less than 30 minutes. which was a major priority for this project, to really be able to enhance that connectivity. We have a number of different, very, very important uses along this route. We have Glendale Community College. We have our civic auditorium, so that serves as a pretty attractive node in terms of visitors, people using it, commuting to school, commuting to work. We have our own corridor here along Glendale with commercial uses, City Hall. That is a very short hop off of the Verdugo Wash. We have our downtown employment center, obviously, our West Glendale corridor, and knowing that the NoHo BRT is also coming through here with protected bicycle infrastructure, another great opportunity to connect to the Verdugo Wash. There's actually an existing access point about a block away from where one of the stops will be located for the BRT and those protected bicycle lanes. And also looking at it from a regional perspective, we can now connect to Burbank. We can get onto the Los Angeles River. We can connect to Los Angeles as well through this kind of network, and creating this broader network of that tributary system not just being a means to control water, but to be able to move people as well. So this goes beyond just being able to move people within that kind of 30-minute window within Glendale's boundaries, but being able to expand those commuting distances as well. Public engagement to date, we have done a number of in-person neighborhood meetings. We did these largely by request or by reaching out to some of the neighborhoods. So we've met with several of the neighborhoods along the Wash. Many of those meetings actually were held in people's backyards. That gave us an opportunity to see what it is that they may have been concerned about, or maybe what they may appreciate about the project. When we launched this project, we were still pretty much in the height of the pandemic, so we relied heavily on online public engagement. We had launched a separate website for this project, verdugowash.com. We released a series of surveys, some oriented around initial ideas and what people may want to see from this kind of project. We gave them a second survey that gave us some examples of what this project could be and asking what their preferences may be. And then we took their pulse based on the designs that we had released later on, the ones that we had gone through here. All with the intent to try to understand how people would use the Wash, what they wanted to see in the Wash, what kind of environment that they wanted to see. These same exercises were actually replicated on the in-person events as well. We had brought out giant boards with precedent cards that people could kind of pin to locations, asking them how they may use the space, how they may travel it, where they may start and where they may end. That would help us identify where some of those access points would be most logical in terms of where people's destinations and point of origins would be. We had a multi-site event, 3 different locations, Fremont Park, Verdugo Park, and a downtown storefront on February 19th as well. And once we release the document, following the city council date on the 15th, we'll go around and have additional public meetings to have broader discussions about what the conclusion was from the visioning stage and what people may want to see from any subsequent stages of work and the priorities that they may have. We put together a stakeholder working group. Really, this is more of a technical advisory group in many regards. These were people who had worked on the Los Angeles River, people with environmental, transportation, business, residential concerns, ideas around these. So we tried to put together a pretty broad cross-section of people who could provide us input. This is by no means the end-all, be-all in terms of that public engagement. If we move into that next phase, we would see this replicated over many different neighborhoods so that we can make sure that we're getting that unique perspective as we refine and retool those designs. So we'll have many different working groups that will be a part of this. We also had an internal working group with the city to help answer some of those questions and concerns from the residents. That included members from community development, police, fire, public works, parks, and the city manager's office as well. Really trying to understand, we had questions regarding police and safety. We had questions about potential for enhanced wildfire risk. What do we do with flooding events? How do we maintain and take care of this? And we were able to get some very valuable feedback. You'll notice in those renderings, you don't see some of the nuance and detail that would probably be there if this project was built out. Things like police call boxes. Those elements weren't all incorporated into those early concepts. There would be access hatches to get underneath to maintain and take care of the Wash. There's a number of different kind of features that we learned through our internal working group and through our conversations with the neighborhood that we would need to address. So in questions regarding fire safety or fire danger, we would be using a fire-resistant planting per the fire marshal and their recommendations and their guidelines. In terms of policing, we would be able to provide access for motorcycles and police to be able to access that by motorcycle, by foot, and by bicycle. Much of the Wash is visible from the right-of-way, so it allows that to be patrolled and viewed from officers in their police car. So a number of different opportunities to ensure that we can provide a safe environment. In terms of significant rain events, we would see this closed down. We would need to figure out what those gates would look like, how that would be done, but that is the intent, that this would be closed down during significant rain events. It would likely also operate similar to our parks around the city of Glendale and really work from a kind of dawn to dusk operating hours. You also notice that things like lighting weren't incorporated into that design. Those are all ideas and concepts that will be incorporated in the final report. As I mentioned, there's going to be kind of a kit of parts and how we can create kind of safety, privacy, protection from fire hazard depending on the different location that we're at. So there will be kind of a suite of options that can be deployed. When we did survey the public, we asked what were the attributes that were important to them in seeing an enhanced vertigo wash or revisioned vertigo wash. Some of the biggest things we heard, public safety was number one, creation of new open space, pedestrian and cyclist routes, and that natural habitat restoration. And while we can't go in there and soften the river bottom as we would have hoped, we do see a lot of unique opportunities to really enhance the landscaping, the green space that's actually within the vertigo wash. We also asked residents on a scale of 1 to 5, how much do you support a reimagined vertigo wash? We had a 4.0. This is about 1,000 responses to the online survey. And we also heard a number of comments, again, really centered around kind of public safety. That is a key component, the operations and maintenance, all of that, those are details that will be kind of worked out as we continue to advance through the design. So kind of next steps, we anticipated completing this visioning during the summer. We were actually supposed to be here in front of you back in August, and I was unable to make that meeting, so my apologies. We have continued here tonight, but we have waited to produce that report until we do get the TPC's feedback. We need to continue to identify sources to conduct the feasibility and environmental. There needs to be a lot more design refinement work that goes into this. There's clearly going to be a heavy environmental element to this. We've been working with and talking with LA County Flood Control as well as the Army Corps of Engineers. So there's a lot of work to be done on that front. We have identified some funding sources. We have some pretty exciting announcements coming in April regarding that. And we also have some other opportunities that could help with some kind of early implementation from an environmental perspective as well. So really looking at those kind of, those potential early implementation opportunities specifically around the debris basin. That's really about enhancing the vegetation, the natural environment that's there. We are concurrently updating our bicycle transportation plan, so this is a great opportunity for us to be able to link up networks and be able to identify where those access points should be along the wash. So those are all projects that are going to factor into this and kind of work hand in hand. Same thing goes with the integration with the Metro BRT. As I mentioned, there's going to be a BRT stop, protected bicycle path on Glen Oaks. It's a great opportunity to link people up and be able to connect to downtown through a safe, dedicated pathway. And obviously, we have the adoption and the implementation of the citywide pedestrian plan. That needs to be factored into this project as well. So in terms of those next steps, it's really getting that council direction. Again, our recommendation would be this project would, the terminating points would be at the debris basin north of Oakmont Country Club, and then Confluence Park with the Los Angeles River, and getting that direction on how to move forward and what ideas council may want to see incorporated into that next phase of work. So that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions and hopefully receive some of your thoughts and feedback in the project so we can incorporate that into the report.
Thank you so much for that presentation. Colleagues, does anyone want to offer some comments? May I? Yes, please.
First of all, I'd like to applaud you for a fantastic presentation. I think this project is one of the best projects that City of Glendale has taken on, and I hope that the obstacles that you're waiting is not going to delay the implementation of this plan. Hopefully, we can move forward with this. I think everything you mentioned over here, I want to thank you, thank city staff, and whoever's involved with this project. You guys are doing a great job. Hopefully, we can move forward and get this plan implemented as soon as possible. My question for you is that, do you have a timeline for this thing to go? When do you want to start this? It's a great, great program. When is it going to be? It's been already like 2.5 years, and
That's going to take some additional work to understand. I think what we would like to be able to do, pending any potential secured funding to move into the next phase, is to take a portion of that and identify something that we could implement early on. whether that's enhancing the debris basin, maybe that's building a first segment of it connecting to the Los Angeles River. I think once we kind of get a grasp on that, we'll be able to understand what that timeline would be, and then I think it's really going to be a matter of momentum at that point. If we can create a vision that is well supported and is exciting, we'd be able to move through this hopefully sooner. But we don't have a specific timeline. Like I said, we're in January 1st at 12:01 in the morning right now, maybe 12:02 at this point. But.
Well, you got my support on it, though. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for the presentation, Mr. Callworks. And my only question/concern is that you have mentioned that the area that is not as wide, there is no separation between cyclists and pedestrians. So I was concerned about the safety of that particular area, and if this plan for that specific part is final. I know you have mentioned that if it goes deeper, it's expensive. The wider part had another issue. So are there any other options that they've been discussed?
Right now, I think what we're looking at is not moving forward with that segment at this point. Again, from what we heard from the public, but also just those physical limitations. The slope there is even steeper than it is when you get further down the wash, so that separation is even more important in that area. And being that we can't provide that, we couldn't guarantee that right now, the feedback we heard from the neighborhoods, that's just not a segment that we would move forward with. As an alternative, if it's something that interests those neighborhoods, we may consider off-pathway improvements that could, whether that's protected bicycle lanes along some of the streets there. There is actually the Locker Center project that is moving forward with the Public Works team. Those kind of off-route improvements that could ultimately connect to it that maybe just don't enhance the actual segments of the wash up there.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll echo what my colleague said about how great this project is looking. At this early stage, I don't have any I don't see any problems to flag at this point, only things to sort of highlight that seem great. I think, for me, I think importantly, access is going to be something to keep in the forefront, getting to it. So you mentioned, several times entrance points, are people going to see entrance points near them, and to, there will be a lot of the city that won't be, a couple of blocks from here. They'll have to right of ways. So what you just mentioned about potentially thinking about it as part of a network, specifically the bicycle plan update, that really, to me, is important to be integrated with the development of this wash plan. So I guess one possible concern is just going through the design going through the processes. You were talking about lessons learned. So people who ride the LA River Path know there's a lot of places where you're out of view of the general public, and this is, from the perspective of what I've seen, my own experience, this is where danger, sometimes it doesn't feel safe. So I'd like to encourage the designers to focus on making sure that all the areas are within the public view, not necessarily the city, but within the wash itself, so that there's a vista that you can see into and see the spaces, and not a lot of enclosed, spaces like that. I didn't see much like that in the graphics. There was one where it was a terrace, and it looked like maybe one of the terraces could be a little secluded, but I'm sure the designers are on top of that. And the visuals are amazing. I think making this very appealing visually is very important, and it looks like they are succeeding, Those are my comments. So just thanks a lot. This looks amazing. Can't wait.
Thank you. If you don't mind, I have a couple of thoughts too. First off, I love the presentation. I think having seen other iterations of this has really come a long way in helping to kind of spark the inspiration and the sense of what this can accomplish. So I'm excited that the council will get to see this. I also really appreciated kind of the storyline of the presentation and giving some of the background. The Atlanta Belt seemed like such a good example. I like that you, had that in the beginning and then kind of referenced it back. I will say, as someone who's particularly interested in this for a variety of reasons, including, I think a lot of us have a concept of what it means to revisit the Wash with the soft bottom. So I was really intrigued to hear you describe some of the science and the problem with that. I think that's helpful to hear because that was maybe surprising at a previous iteration. It wasn't kind of talked about so much. So kind of understanding that is fascinating. But it is kind of a standard concept about what people would expect. So I wrote some notes down. It sounds, kind of interesting that the concrete really helps the water to flow. Maybe what I'm understanding too is that unlike the LA River, which of course changed course over many decades, but was fairly concentrated as a river, it's almost like you're describing the Wash historically didn't concentrate water in that same way. So it wasn't set up to have that soft bottom and kind of absorb the water, which of course has so many benefits. So I think that's, the automatic go-to is what you could do with the Wash would be the water filtration and groundwater replenishment. So it sounds like that's not really as possible here. You showed some examples that had a partial version of that. I want to go ahead and, encourage where that is possible to have that kind of partial soft bottom in the middle. Of course, the supporting native habitat and wildlife is important too. But I do really appreciate your explanation of that and better understanding the science, the ecological science, and how that would work or not work here. I had maybe some questions. I understand where the basin is. It does make sense that maybe the project concludes at that northern end, particularly because we were talking about the La Crescenta project. That does seem like interesting fruition. The renderings, I guess I had a question to better kind of understand. There was proposed renderings. Would we imagine, we saw like scenes of, people playing and bikes riding and paths and landscaping. So we would imagine underneath that is kind of another layer of potential water flow.
Are you referring to the debris basin itself?
No.
Or just the wash itself?
The wash itself, some of the renderings of, and I really appreciate this image before you leave from it too. This looks like this is the debris basin
Yes, this is
in a
the
way that I had
existing
never
conditions, yeah.
seen. I mean, I've never been down there, so this is amazing. I have some other questions like, when does that water exist? I also, I'm so curious about that, and I think there's a lot of potential for, the vision that you had. But yes, my question was about some of the renderings and just getting a sense of the infrastructure, knowing that the concept now is to kind of build a level above.
There really wouldn't be a whole lot happening underneath that. Maybe there's some opportunities for kind of groundwater recharging if there's ways to get in there. But the challenge there is the wash is actually sunk. Your groundwater table in most cases actually sits a little bit higher.
Yes.
So we wouldn't really have as many opportunities to do that as I think we would have hoped. So really that would just be the infrastructure kind of touching down in the wash. If there are opportunities for kind of water recapture, water filtration, anything along those lines, that's likely going to happen within kind of the raised platform.
Oh, I see.
We floated a number of different concepts and ideas that we may have in the kind of final iteration of this report of where we would be able to maybe capture some of that storm water, treat it, and being that we are sitting a little higher, maybe there are opportunities where we can feed that back into specific locations. We know there are a number of sites that could be developed along the wash that the city owns or turned into park-like settings. Maybe those are more appropriate locations where we could go back and recharge the water table there.
I see. Okay, that makes sense. It sounds like a combination. Yeah, and then just this being the basin, and this was a unique example that you kind of showed, like leaving a lot of it alone, but perhaps having a walkway through it. And this is, the northern end would be then the conclusion too.
Correct. This is at the far northern end, actually. That image was taken in April, and that was about the only location where there was some standing water.
Wow.
There. It was a pretty dry year that year as well, but I believe there was another time we were there, we saw deer out in that kind of field. So I think what we would look at here is really kind of enhancing that natural element. I mean, I believe one of our design consultants was collecting tadpoles from this body of water as well. So there's a lot of opportunity to really kind of enhance that, a la the Atlanta Beltline and what they did with that kind of park. Are there ways that we can bring natural habitat, a wildlife back into this and still be able to provide access for people, but do it in a very, very light touch? So we would not see kind of large civic gathering spaces here. We wouldn't want people to get into this area necessarily. We would want to keep them on those kind of boardwalks.
That makes sense. And this area is also not soft bottom, is that right?
This area is, so actually what you're looking
Okay.
at here, this is concrete, and then it looks like it's rocks and stones, but it's actually kind of glued, if you will, onto the wash itself. But the rest of this is all soft bottom here. We actually walked through, because the rest of that was actually dry. And, you know, there was wildflowers growing in there in the kind of late spring.
Wow. Okay. And then just one thought too, I know you talked about kind of where, you didn't use this term, but you know, maybe where a pilot project starts, or I would just encourage, while I love this sounds very exciting, also on the southern portion, because I do think the southern portion of Glendale in particular needs that. So I'm encouraging that.
What I'll add to that too is we see that as, you know, the southern portion being the kind of, that's a good place for a pilot project, because that's about mobility and access. Well, we've identified some pretty unique funding opportunities from a natural habitat perspective as to why we would maybe make some moves in this area early on as
Great.
well. But the goal would be some sort of kind of pilot project, early implementation on kind of the southern segments connecting to the LA River Trail.
Excellent. Thank you.
Can I add one?
Please.
I just had one more question on that southern part. There was long ago the LA River, it was called Alternative 20. It was like this vision for the confluence area. They had a big plan with quite a bit of support. This was many years ago, for basically the confluence. And it seemed like isn't there some soft bottom there?
There are locations within the Los Angeles River and near Confluence Park where they were able to do that. They were able to, and I guess this kind of goes back to some of the questions from Commissioner Bonston. It's much wider there than what we have to work with. And as acknowledged, that was actually a river at one point. It was a real river that flowed. The Verdugo Wash was really more of a canyon. There was some trickle that would occur, but there was not a constant stream of water that went through there.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you so much.
Madam Chair, would you like to see if there are any callers on the item?
I would love to see if there are any callers.
There are no callers.
Too bad.
And the motion to note and file?
There's a motion to note and file that I'm offering. Looking for a
Second.
second.
I'll take roll call. Chairperson Bonstein,
Yes?
Commissioner Avagian,
Yes.
Commissioner Lester,
Yes.
Commissioner Ordubegian,
Yes.
Commissioner Yakubian.
Next item, please.
Action items.
Madam Chair, members of commission, this is a traffic signal synchronization program that we bring before you, something we've been working on for a while. And our principal traffic engineer, Pastor Casanova, is going to present that. Mr. Casanova?
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the commission, tonight I'll be providing a brief presentation regarding the traffic signal synchronization project. Okay, there we go. The scope of the work of the project includes the optimizing and synchronization of 50 traffic signals within the downtown area of Glendale. Generally, traffic signals should be optimized and synchronized every 10 years to accommodate for changes in land development, traffic patterns, traffic volumes, and changes in the roadway conditions and infrastructure. Traffic signal synchronization takes a lot of planning, effort, and infrastructure to implement. This downtown synchronization project was made possible by a Metro Call for Projects funding opportunity that was awarded to the city of Glendale. And that project was called the Regional Arterial Traffic Performance Measure System. That project included improvements to the communication infrastructure of the traffic signals, as well as video detection systems that are capable of detecting bicycles, and integration of up to 65 signalized intersections to the Glendale Traffic Management Center. Part of the scope also included the development of a synchro traffic model, which the term synchro is a software that's used in the industry to optimize and synchronize traffic signal systems. As part of the consultant's contract on the project, there was a value-added service, or rather a no-cost service that was added to implement some of the findings of the traffic model at 50 traffic signal intersections in the downtown area. So what is traffic signal synchronization? Well, as the name implies, it involves a series of synchronizing a series of traffic signals to allow vehicles to be able to drive along the street at the speed limit without having to stop unnecessarily. This is done by adjusting the timers in the traffic signal controllers, calculating arrival times based on the speed limits, and setting the signals to a common cycle length along an arterial corridor. On the screen is a graphic showing the synchronization concept. With the graphic up on the top, we see 3 vehicles. They receive a green light, and then they traverse to the next intersection on their way. And as they get to the next intersection, before they get to that location, they'll receive a green in an ideal synchronization scenario. This is a traffic signal engineer's dream here. It's what we use as a tool to help identify when those platoons of vehicles are arriving. So just to make it, just to summarize it easily, on the left side you see a schematic of a street network. You see 3 intersections labeled 1, 2, 3. So engineers look at the spacing between the intersections and the timing, which goes left to right, to be able to adjust those timing patterns so that as you're progressing and driving along the corridors, you can receive a green at the next intersection. In this scenario, without getting to detail, it shows perfect progression in both directions. That's not always the case, but it is a tool that the engineers use, again, to optimize the timing and synchronization. This is a very important slide here. It shows really the majority of the benefits that come along with signal synchronization. As we would commonly expect, it'll improve traffic flow, reduce travel times, as well as control travel speeds, but that also reduces to the potential less gallons of fuels that are used, reduction in greenhouse gases, and generally improved air quality. Down below on the slide are a few bullet items that were taken from the FHWA, or a federal website, that show some other improvements as well that include this reduction also applies to other vehicles such as emergency vehicles, transit buses, the general public, as well as the potential to reduce serious accidents and reducing aggressive driving and red light running. So as well as one of on the last bullet, an important takeaway is that this sort of project optimizes an existing system that we already have. So that could in the future eliminate really any sort of need to construct any sort of additional roadway capacity, because we're basically making what we have as efficient as it can get. Some of the expected changes that we could expect are a slightly longer wait times for the side streets. Sometimes that can be real, but also perceived, because the traffic signals are now set to a coordinated cycle to turn green, really, when they're supposed to, if you want to call it that. And on this slide, we see a vicinity map of the downtown area, and in yellow circles, the locations where this project would be implemented. Generally, there's 3 north-south corridors in the downtown area, including Central, Brand, and Glendale Avenue, and 2 east-west corridors that include Broadway and Colorado Street. So staff is here tonight to request the Transportation and Parking Commission to request to the City Council the approval of the traffic signal synchronization project and allow Public Works to move forward with the project. And with that, I will answer any questions you may have.
Are there any callers?
There's one caller, yeah.
I'd like to go ahead and begin with the caller before we have discussion. Thank you.
Dawn, you're on the air.
Perhaps we can come back to the caller. Is he still there? Okay. Do any of the commissioners have comments? Please.
I just want to ask you a quick questions regarding, let's say, on certain times of the day or night when there's no traffic or less traffic. Are those signals being just programmed to on a certain time frame to move, or for example, let's say at 2 o'clock in the morning, you're stopped at an intersection, you want to make a left turn. Would that light recognizes that you're there and then you make it faster? Because I know there are part of town that you can actually do that. It recognizes and turns it to green, so you don't have to wait too long for the light to turn green. Is that something that it's in this synchronization as well?
Yes, Commissioner Ordubegian and members of the commission, that's a very good question, a very good point. This project, what it proposes for the synchronization are the peak traffic hours. So mainly it'll be focused on the AM peak traffic hours, PM, as well as a midday peak. But during the evenings, the traffic signals will continue to operate as they are now, and in some cases along those locations where there's minimal traffic and a vehicle approaches on the side street, it would not be on a coordinated cycle, so it would trigger based on demand.
Thank you. Any other comments? Go ahead.
I have a question, if you allow. And I apologize if I'm not very familiar with this particular topic. But if you said that this is something that's happening every 10 years approximately, right? Am I correct, or did I misunderstand that?
Yes, Commissioner Avagi and members of the commission, that is the recommended time period to look at traffic signal timing and see if it's time to optimize and synchronize it. For City of Glendale, it's been at least 10 years, if not more.
Okay, and if I understand it correctly, definitely this is something that we need to financially commit to this, and you have mentioned that there was a budget provided for that. So if we are doing this modification, and as my colleague Commissioner Ordubegian mentioned, if the sensor factor is not one of the main features of this particular project, maybe we should look into the project that can actually have more censored features to be able to, as far as the peak hours, to be able to control some of the things and then have all the benefits, and at the same time to actually be able to censor during AM hours what's happening. If I understand it correctly, so that's not something that is the main issue. So if it's going to be continuing to operate the same way as it does right now, we don't have that, right? If I'm not making myself clear,
If I may, Commissioner Avagi and members of Commission, so with this project, if it's approved for moving forward, we will be able to implement synchronization in these 50 signals. So for the AM peak hours and the PM peak hours and midday, it would be synchronized. What Mr. Casanova was referring to was outside of those hours, like late at night or early morning, it would revert back to what it is right now. But it would improve the performance during the peak hours, basically.
Okay, so I got it correctly. So it's going to be improving it for peak hours, but for the regular hours, there's nothing that's happening to it. It stays as is.
It will revert back to what it is, yes.
Okay.
Commissioner Lester, do you have comments or questions?
I do, thank you. I have a number of questions here. First, just to clarify, did I hear 65 additional signals? We're talking about 50, right? In the map you showed, that last graphic?
Yes, Commissioner Lesters and members of the commission, what was mentioned is integrating up to 65 traffic signals into the performance measure system. They're
Okay.
existing traffic signals, just that they were supplemented with communication devices
I
and
see.
detection devices and integrated into a cohesive system that can measure performance.
Great, thanks. And based on the staff report, is some of the fiber optic, the communications equipment already in place? Was that what it was saying?
Yes, Commissioner Lester, that is correct. Most of the existing fiber structure was in place. This particular project, the Regional Arterial Traffic Performance Measure System, added a fiber gap, so a short portion of fiber on Broadway between Chevy Chase and Glendale Avenue.
Great, thank you for that. I had a few more. For me, with this project, I mean, it's evident that efficiency is a great goal, and so my concern would just be basically the overall safety implications. The efficiency here seems to be and who the efficiency affects, like it's efficiency for car throughput, clearly. And how would it affect the efficiency of the other modes? Like you mentioned some additional delays for pedestrians crossing these corridors. So my first main question would be just how this plan would make the corridors safer and not more dangerous.
Yes, Commissioner Lester, members of the commission, there's various ways this project can help with the safety aspects. One is with a synchronized system. There's less driver frustration, and which leads to more of an encouragement of following the rules, less red light running, and potentially less collisions. In reference to the pedestrians, bicycles, all of the timing parameters that are worked with in synchronization really are formed around the basic timing that's provided to the pedestrians to cross the street. Any sort of bicycle initial green times that are programmed in the controllers, all of those stay the same and within the state standards. And really the optimization of the synchronization works around that. So really the system looks at safety from all perspectives, including the pedestrians and bicycles perspective.
Do you have a rough idea of what the potential increases in wait times for pedestrians trying to cross might be?
It will vary depending on what system was running out there currently. If there was an existing system out there, I believe the longest increase is 10 seconds per cycle. Some other locations may actually have a decrease that we're running what we call free non-coordinated, just based on demand whenever. And in those cases, a pedestrian may even wait less time.
I see, thanks. Yeah, 10 seconds probably as a trade-off is in the acceptable range. I mentioned it because, for a lot of pedestrian trips that are 5 minutes, a 90-second wait is a large proportion of time, right? So you can say that the delay may affect some modes more than others, especially modes you're trying to promote in the city. And one other just note. So the thing about red light running, my experience with Green Street in Pasadena, which I believe has synchronized signals, it's one way, a big one way, is that Yeah, people don't run the red lights at the front of the platoon. They run them at the rear because you don't want to be left behind. So if you're in the back of a large group of cars and here comes the yellow, that's where people floor it. So I would just mention that as a potential issue with safety. One more question would be, was there collision and speed data collected as well as volume?
Commissioner Lester, members of the commission, the data that was acquired for this project was traffic volume and speed, which are the speed limit data.
Speed. Is there any chance that I guess, collision and speed data can be compared against the program once it starts to basically verify safety impacts?
The speed data that I was referring to was the engineering and traffic surveys that are used to set the legal speed limits. So that could be looked at again, but generally those legal speed limits are looked at when they expire, or every 7 years. I think they're extended now to every 10 years. So it would require a special direction to do that, but it can be done.
If I could add to that, Commissioner Lester, basically what we did was stayed within the same parameters that these streets had with the verified and calibrated speed limits that they had. So those were all based on measuring the 85th percentile. And so the study was based on evaluating those speed limits and optimizing it for that. So the presumption is that that initial safety analysis has already been done, and then we did this assuming, we're just improving the flow, basically.
All right. My question was just like, is there information that can be drawn upon in the future in order to compare before and after the synchronization? That's the main question. I mean, and also, this can you say for sure that you have reason to believe that using the synchronization will actually help enforce the speed limit? As in, that was one of the things in the report.
Yes, I would hesitate from saying enforcing the speed limit, but what it does, it sets the traffic flow to the speed limit. So for those vehicles or drivers that would travel faster than that, they would arrive at the next signal earlier and get a red. So essentially, that penalizes speeding.
I see, like an incentive to drive the speed limit.
Yes.
Well, so in terms of the ability to compare pre and post conditions, was there an answer for that, whether that could be possible or not?
Commissioner Lester, we can certainly look at that. If this project moves forward, we have the traffic data and the accident data that we can set as the benchmark, and then after this has been implemented, we can certainly come back and compare it, say, 3 to 6 months after that.
Thank you. Great. Sorry to go on just a little more. So if we're going to be modifying signal timing, is there opportunities for LPI to be added to intersections? And in addition, how about automatic pedestrian recall, which is not having to press the button? Is there a chance to integrate that into these synchronized corridors?
Commissioner Lester, members of the commission, certainly implementing this project does not preclude the implementation of leading pedestrian interval based on potentially using the citywide pedestrian plan as a guide. So that can still be implemented with or without the synchronization project.
Since this is going to be based on timing as opposed to sensing, right? So that tends to lend itself to automatic pedestrian recall, right? If you have a timed system.
The automatic pedestrian recall is not part of what we're doing here in this project. It may potentially have some impact to traffic flow if you activate the traffic signals for pedestrians when there's no pedestrians there. So currently at all the downtown intersections have pedestrian push buttons to be able to be activated.
I guess what I'm asking is, if you have an opportunity to improve the efficiency of throughput for cars, it seems like you could also improve that for pedestrians by not having to push, especially in the downtown areas tend to have more people walking. So it seems like this is an opportunity. Is there any chance that can be pursued? At least look for the possibility to include those elements, leading pedestrian interval and recall.
Commissioner Lester, I believe those are some of the projects that have been identified as part of the pedestrian master plan. Is that correct, Mr. Casanova?
I mean, yes, it is. And I'll also add to that, as I had some time to think about how we're currently timing the traffic signals. And in the greater downtown area, the traffic signals are already set to self-activate the pedestrian signals during the, I believe it's 7 o'clock in the morning to 6 or 7 p.m., somewhere around those timeframes. So that will continue to be the case. That will not be changed.
Did you say all of them?
Well, I can't say all of them, but I could say the greater downtown area, from the timing that I've observed, are programmed to yes, actuate the pedestrian signals automatically.
Okay, great. I've seen some of them that were automatic, but I didn't know there was a large number.
I think the intent was at some point, precedes my time here, to a citywide project in the downtown area, to implement the self-actuating signals during from morning to evening.
Great, thanks. I'll just, my main concern is safety and for everybody moving around the city. So thanks for patiently taking my questions.
They were very interesting questions and answers. Do we still have a caller?
Yes. Don, you're on the air.
Okay, so our caller is not with us anymore. Would anyone, I guess my comment would be, thank you for the presentation. I saw a lot of merits to this, although I really appreciated the questions that you asked, Commissioner Lester, as well. And I think in hearing some of the feedback, a report back perhaps in 6 months sounds really appropriate to me. Perhaps that's part of a motion to kind of better understand the safety aspects and the data that is showing as a result. Would anyone like to offer a motion?
I would like to offer a motion to accept your proposal. I honestly think that synchronization and calibration is a must. It needs to happen citywide. So that's the motion that I'm making. Do we have a second if you want to?
If I may, Mr. Leitenberg, should the motion be to recommend approval to City Council in terms of moving forward with the synchronization?
Yes, that's correct, as per the written motion that's included in the packets.
Are you interested in a friendly amendment to the motion? Commissioner Lester, yes?
Well, yeah, I mean, my interest would be to create some time frame, not necessarily 6 months, but some long-term plan to study the pre and post condition that this, because it could, I mean, it seems like it would be helpful regardless to know how it works, pro or con, ways to tweak it.
May I just ask a quick question? The synchronization, that doesn't mean that you're going to speed up the traffic or let people go faster. I think it's just trying to time things correctly. So that will increase the safety parameters that we were looking for over here. So that's I think, sorry, that should be the case. But I agree with you as far as the time frame goes to do a better study to understand all the aspects of this concept and go forward.
And I think Commissioner Lester's point too is that while it may make it efficient for vehicles, we're concerned that it might be at the cost of pedestrians or bicyclists. So it
Agreed.
sounds like, kind of looking into what the data shows, maybe a year, maybe 6 months is too soon, would be helpful.
Indeed.
So is that your motion with the a report back?
Yes, with the report back. That would be the motion with the report back and a specific, not a specific time frame, but with a report back on that.
Okay, if I may just clarify, since we do have a written motion. The Transportation and Parking Commission hereby recommends to City Council the approval of the optimized traffic signal synchronization timing for 50 signalized intersections in downtown Glendale as set forth in the report heard today, and requests a report back following implementation of that program.
Yes.
Thank you.
Do we have a second?
Yes.
I'll take roll call. Chairperson Bonstein,
Yes.
Commissioner Avagyan,
Yes.
Commissioner Ordubegyan,
Yes.
Commissioner Lester,
Yes.
Commissioner Yakubian.
Thank you. Next item?
Oral communications.
Does that mean there's no informational report? Correct.
That is correct, Madam Chair.
Do we have any speakers for oral communication?
We have the same caller that we had before. If we answer the phone, he won't be allowed to speak on the item that we have already closed. We don't know for sure that that's the item that he called on, and so we will answer the phone call requesting oral communication. We cannot go back into the item that's already closed.
Understood. Thank you.
Dawn, you're on the air.
So we don't hear anything for the phone call. I guess we are unable to hear the speaker. We apologize and hope to hear from you next time. Next item is commission and staff comments. Is that right? And updates? Are there any?
No, there aren't.
May I offer one? We have a new commissioner. I just thought we would welcome you, and maybe you want to give us a couple minutes of what brings you here and your background, and we're delighted to have you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. First of all, it's an honor to serve the Glendale community and to sit here and discuss improvements of our beautiful city with such wonderful colleagues. A little bit about my background. I used to, if I go really back, I used to be the student trustee on the board of trustees for Glendale Community College. and then worked at the Glendale Community College, then worked at the Downtown Glendale Association as the Community Relations Coordinator. So that's my city background, which gives me a knowledge and opportunity to be familiar with the city from a employee perspective, from a resident's perspective too, because I've been living in Glendale for the past 18 years and 17, a little more than 17 actually. And other than that, my other career background is, not the background, is actually current. I am the CMO, Chief Marketing Officer of Aniv Micromobility Sharing Company. And that gives me an opportunity to understand the my alternative transportation opportunities for the city to implement innovative projects in the city. And hopefully by serving on this commission, I'll be able to bring in my knowledge, experience as an employee, as a resident of this beautiful city, and maybe part of a tech and IT community that is more or less familiar with nowadays innovations. So bring all this to our city and improve it as much as possible, make it even better. It's already a beautiful one, and make it even better. So thank you.
Thank you. And this reminds me, did you get a chance to get welcomed last time? Really? Okay, okay, great. Everyone's been welcomed. We are old.
Thank you for the gesture. Thank you very much.
Okay. Next item, please.
Adjournment.
I make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
We are adjourned.